Medieval peasants barely used money. Not because they were too poor for it, because money, in their world, barely existed. The smallest coin bought you a full day's bread. To spend less, you took a chisel and cut the coin into quarters. The mint itself did the cutting. Plumbers were paid partly in beer, by contract, every single day. When neighbors owed each other money, they often didn't pay. They walked into court, matched debt against debt, and canceled everything out without a single coin moving. There was no credit score. People extended credit based on, quote, your vibes. For 700 years, England refused to dilute its silver, even when it meant the country ran out of small change. That same obsession survived all the way to 1992, when George Soros broke the Bank of England in a single afternoon. 1437. An English village. A butcher drags a farmer into court demanding 8 shillings 6 pence for unpaid meat. Same day, same court. The farmer sues the butcher back, claiming the butcher owes him 10 shillings for a cow he sold him and for boarding the butcher's horse. The judge doesn't even rule. Both men withdraw their cases on the spot. Not a single coin changes hands. The accounts are even. Done. This is how medieval peasants handled money. They didn't pay each other. They settled accounts. A medieval village wasn't an economy of coins moving from hand to hand. It was a web of overlapping IOUs. The butcher owed the blacksmith owed the baker owed the farmer owed the butcher. Every few months, everyone got together, matched debts against debts, canceled what they could, and only the leftover difference ever touched actual money. Most transactions in a medieval village happened without coins appearing at all. Which raises the obvious question. Why? Why didn't they just use money like normal people? Because there wasn't enough of it, not even close. The smallest coin in medieval England was called a farthing, 1/4 of a penny. And 1 farthing could buy you a full loaf of bread big enough to feed you for a day. So what happened if you needed to spend less than that? Less than a day's bread? You took the coin, and you cut it, with a chisel, into halves or quarters. I'm not making this up. In the Anglo-Saxon period, the mint itself did the cutting before the coins left the building. After the Norman conquest, ordinary people did it themselves at home. Imagine your central bank printing dollar bills and then handing you scissors so you could cut them into quarters because they refused to print anything smaller. That was medieval English monetary policy for several centuries. Why? Why not just mint smaller coins? Because minting a tiny coin costs the same labor as minting a huge one. The same hammer, the same die, the same worker, the same time. You strike 1 farthing, or you strike 1 gold noble worth 360 times more. The labor is identical. So to produce the same total value in farthings, you need 360 times the work. Small coins lose money to make. Continental Europe solved this with Billion coinage, mostly copper, just a sliver of silver for show. France did it. Italy did it. The Low Countries did it. Cheap to produce, plenty to go around. England refused. For 700 years, English mints refused to debase their silver. Every English penny was 92% pure silver, struck to weight, century after century. They would rather let the entire country run out of small change than mint anything that wasn't pure. Remember this, we're coming back to it. So you've got a country where the smallest coin buys a day's food, where most people see 1 or 2 coins a week if they're lucky, and where the whole concept of small change basically doesn't exist. How does anyone actually live? Credit. Everything ran on credit. Not bank credit. Not paperwork credit, neighbor credit. Your butcher knows you. Your baker knows you. Your blacksmith knows you. You walk into the butcher's shop, you take the meat, he writes nothing down because he probably can't write, and you both remember. Next month, you bring him eggs from your chickens. He subtracts the eggs from the meat. You owe him a little less now. 3 months later, you trade him firewood. He owes you a little. And on and on. The court records are full of this. Real example. A village in 1440. Records show one woman, over the course of a single year, had active credit relationships with 23 different neighbors. 23. She wasn't a merchant. She was a regular villager. That was normal. A medieval village was a living spreadsheet. Everyone tracked everyone else, mostly in their heads, and the math got reconciled at festivals, fairs, and harvest time. But this raises the next question. If everything is credit, who gets credit? Why does the butcher trust you? Why does anyone trust anyone? There's no credit score, no FICO, no bank report, no central registry. So what do they go on? I'll quote a historian directly. When deciding whether to extend credit to someone, medieval people asked, how is he dressed? What does he do for work? Where is he from? Who are his people? And, quote, what are his vibes? Yes, the historian actually used the word vibes. Medieval credit was vibes-based finance. If you looked shifty, if your clothes were torn, if nobody in the village knew your cousin, you weren't getting a farthing on credit. If you were the blacksmith's nephew, married to the miller's daughter, regular at church, you could walk into any shop in the village and walk out with whatever you needed. You'd settle up later. Everyone knew you. Everyone trusted you. Your vibes were impeccable. This sounds primitive. It isn't. The same system runs every small business in the world today. You've had coffee at the same cafe for 2 years. One day you forget your wallet. The barista waves it off. Get me next time. That's medieval credit. That's vibes. We just dressed it up with apps and call it something else. The difference is that in the medieval world, this wasn't the exception. This was the entire economy. Wages worked the same way. Half the time, wages weren't even paid in coin. Exeter, England, 1426. The city's municipal account book. A plumber named John Date and his workers are paid for repairing pipes. Their wages, written in the contract, 1 penny per day, plus ale. Daily allowance of ale built directly into the wage. This wasn't a perk. It wasn't a bonus. It was a contract clause. The municipal accountants of Exeter recorded ale as a wage line item. Workers were paid partly in beer, by law, by agreement, every single day. Try this with your wife today. Tell her your boss is paying 10% of your salary in Heineken. See how that goes. In medieval England, this was completely standard, because beer was reliable, beer kept, beer fed you, and there weren't enough coins to go around anyway. So coin paid for some of the wage, beer paid for the rest. Everyone got what they actually needed, and the labor market kept moving, without depending on a coin supply that didn't exist. Now, let's go back to the question that opened this whole thing. The accounts of Warwick Castle in 1418 show that the falconers and the birds together cost about £8 for the year. £8. Sounds normal. Sounds like a number you could pay with a stack of bills. It isn't. In 1418, in England, there was no such thing as £8. There was no £1 coin. There was no £5 note. There was nothing in the entire English monetary system that came close to £1 as a physical object. The first English coin worth roughly £1, the gold guinea, wasn't struck until the 1500s. For 700 years before that, nobody in England had ever held a pound in their hand, because pounds didn't exist as objects. Pounds existed as accounting fictions. A pound was 240 pennies. That was the entire definition. A pound was a number you wrote in a ledger, not a thing you put on a table. So when the steward of Warwick Castle wrote £8 for the falconry in 1418, he was writing 1,920 pennies. And of those 1,920 pennies, most never moved. They were recorded against this account, cancelled against that account, paid partly in ale to the kennel workers, partly in grain to the bird feeders, partly settled against the next debt the castle owed someone else. £8 was never a stack of money. £8 was a story the steward told in a ledger to make sense of a year of transactions that mostly didn't involve coins at all. Medieval money wasn't money the way you think of money. It was a recording system overlaid on top of an economy that ran almost entirely on credit, trust, debt, beer, grain, labor, and memory. Now, finally, that 700-year refusal. The English refusing to debase their silver, refusing to mint copper alloy coins, letting their own peasants chisel coins into quarters rather than admit the currency might need to be cheaper. That obsession didn't die in the Middle Ages. It kept going. 1925. Winston Churchill drags the pound back onto the gold standard at the pre-war rate. Brutal deflation. The country can't afford it. 6 years later, in 1931, it collapses. England leaves gold. 1947. After the war, sterling claws its way into the Bretton Woods system at a fixed rate. Same instinct, same insistence. The pound must be strong. The pound must hold. September 16, 1992. Black Wednesday. George Soros sells the pound short. The Bank of England spends £3.3 billion in a single day trying to defend the currency. They fail. Britain is forced out of the European exchange rate mechanism. Soros personally walks away with $1 billion. Same instinct, same century-spanning national obsession. The pound must not look weak. The pound must not be diluted. The pound must hold its value against the neighbors. 700 years of refusing to debase the silver penny, lost in a single afternoon to a Hungarian hedge fund manager. So next time someone tells you medieval peasants were grubbing for copper coins in the dirt, tell them no.